healthcare overhaul. Senate Republicans released their plan for rolling back most of Obamacare.
There'll be unlimited opportunity for people to read it and understand what's in it and then debate it.
Join us for team coverage from the White House and Capitol Hill and an update on pro-life provisions. Bathroom bills, how gender policies are shifting under the Trump administration. Catholics in Europe. We'll take a look at the issues facing the church in Germany. And the God Squad, a new wave of millennial priests are re-energizing the Catholic Church. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, June 22nd, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We are tracking a major development on Capitol Hill. Republican senators just unveiled their long-awaited Obamacare replacement plan. We have team coverage. In a moment, you'll hear what the White House told our Mark Irons. But first, we go to Jason Calvi, who reveals what's in the health care bill and what it means for the pro-life cause. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. This is the first time we're getting a look at exactly what is in the health care bill, and it's running into some major problems right out of the gate. But the White House and Republicans say they share the same goal.
It's a top priority for President Donald Trump and virtually every Republican member of Congress.
Obamacare isn't working by nearly any measure. It has failed, and no amount of 11th hour reality denying or buck passing by Democrats is going to change the fact that more Americans are going to get hurt unless we do something.
Today, Republican leaders revealed what that something is. The Senate bill reduces Obamacare subsidies, ends tax penalties for people who don't buy insurance, and cuts Medicaid for low-income Americans. It also blocks federal Medicaid funds from going to Planned Parenthood for 1 year and bans tax credits from paying for abortions.
It doesn't save money, and it's going to hurt people.
Democrats are united in their opposition and are defending Obamacare.
This is a bill designed to strip away health care benefits and protections from Americans who need it most in order to give a tax break to the folks who need it least.
And 4 Republicans are already saying they won't vote for it as is. Senators Ted Cruz, Ron Johnson, Mike Lee, and Rand Paul say the bill as it's written doesn't fulfill their promise to repeal Obamacare and lower health care costs. But pro-life advocates say the bill protects life and is a long time coming.
You know, we have been pushing for this day for so long. This is what we voted for. For the 600 Planned Parenthood facilities in America, there are more than 13,000 federally qualified health care centers that are ready, willing, and able to provide real life-affirming health care to women.
GOP leaders hope to push the bill through the Senate next week before the July 4th recess.
2 Republicans, Alaska's Lisa Murkowski and Maine's Susan Collins, are against the defunding of Planned Parenthood. If 3 Republicans vote against this bill, it fails. Lauren?
What is the next step for this draft, Jason?
The Congressional Budget Office will be putting together their estimates on how this bill will impact the country's health care. They expect that to be coming out early next week. Then the senators will engage in what's called a vote-a-rama, where every single senator will be able to propose changes to this bill.
We better bring our popcorn. Correspondent Jason Calvi, who will be spending a lot of time at the Capitol next week. Healthcare is a campaign promise President Trump is determined to fulfill. He is closely watching today's developments on Capitol Hill. Correspondent Mark Irons reports from the White House, where this afternoon he asked about a question about abortion funding. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. President Trump says the health care bill is going to be, quote, very good, but it still needs work from senators of both political parties.
We're putting in a plan today that's going to be negotiated. We'd love to have some Democrat support, but they're obstructionists. They'll never support. We won't get one, no matter how good it is, but we will hopefully get something done, and it'll be something with heart.
White House Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders spoke to reporters in an off-camera briefing. I asked her if President Trump will still sign the health care bill if it includes funding for abortion.
The health care bill changes from what it is now, but it's not against the president's desk.
Will the president support a bill that funds Planned Parenthood?
I'm not sure. I'd have to get back to you on that question.
That he wouldn't support a bill.
He has. I would have to get back to you on a specific
the bill
totality
allows
of the
use
bill.
Of health care tax credits to buy coverage for abortion. Do you support that?
Not that I'm aware of, but again, I think it would have to be in the context of the larger legislation. I can't speak to hypothetical on one piece of the bill.
The deputy press secretary there hesitant to say if the president would or would not support a bill that could fund abortion. A reminder that the current bill bans tax credits from going to abortion coverage, but that could change by the time the bill reaches the president's desk to sign into law.
Mark, what's the president's stance on Planned Parenthood and federal funding for abortion?
Well, Lauren, as you heard today, the White House wouldn't answer clearly whether the president supports defunding Planned Parenthood, but Mr. Trump has taken important steps to restrict abortion. The president has reinstated and expanded the Mexico City policy, which bans U.S. aid from organizations that endorse or perform abortions. He's also nominated pro-life Justice Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court and appointed Tom Price, a pro-life doctor, as Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Correspondent Mark Irons at the White House. Thank you, Mark. President Trump makes a long-awaited announcement answering the question if there are tapes of his private Oval Office conversations with former FBI Director James Comey. The president tweeted, quote, "With all of the recently reported electronic surveillance intercepts, unmasking, and illegal leaking of information, I have no idea whether there are tapes or recordings of my conversations with James Comey, but I did not make and do not have any such recordings." A partial victory for pro-life activists, including David Daleiden, reports say a California judge tossed out 14 of the 15 criminal charges against him and Sandra Merritt. They uncovered videos showing Planned Parenthood's alleged sale of aborted baby parts. The judge gave the prosecutor the option to refile the charges if given more evidence. And an appeals court in Mississippi says it can start enforcing a religious freedom law. It says merchants and government employees don't have to violate their faith to help same-sex couples. A district judge had ruled the law creates unequal treatment for gay people. And schools struggle with the best way to handle transgender students. The Obama administration said it would punish schools that didn't allow transgender students to use the bathroom of their choice. But President Trump did reverse those guidelines a few months ago to protect privacy. Joining us now is Kelly Fedoruk, legal counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom. Kelly, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me on.
No problem. This week, the Alliance for Defending Freedom dropped the federal government as a party to your lawsuits because of the government's change of positions, because of what President Trump did. So you're still suing the school districts, and it seems like there's some confusion among the school districts about what the guidelines are or aren't. Who is driving that?
I think it's really the multi-million-dollar advocacy organizations. We had the Obama administration. Now, luckily, we have had that change, as you mentioned. But we're seeing so many organizations trying to force school boards to change their policies, which compromises the privacy rights, the dignity, the well-being of students. And it's really unfortunate to see them pushing effectively this social experiment on students without properly vetting and listening to all the voices that should be at the table.
So what is next for ADF? Will you continue to sue these school districts that are pushing for these things?
Well, our cases are ongoing. We did drop the federal government, the Department of Education, out of the lawsuit this week, but we're still suing the district because their policy is continuing to violate our clients' right to privacy. So we'll continue to litigate that and defend the parents and students that we represent until the school properly addresses it and adopts a common sense policy that takes into account everyone's rights.
Tell me what you mean by right to privacy. You hear that, is that bathroom privacy? What are you talking about specifically?
Right. Well, the Constitution is really clear about that everyone has a right to privacy. It's essentially a right to not be seen in a state of undress in front of a member of the opposite sex. And what we've seen in these changes in policies is schools are forcing boys and girls to be together in intimate facilities, to change clothes, to shower, to change for gym class.
Both bathrooms and locker rooms.
Bathrooms, locker rooms, showers. It even can apply to overnight trips when you're on school trip. And so what we're trying to do is work with the school to say, listen, every child's right to privacy matters, and you can't force a girl to shower or take her clothes off in front of a male student. We have to make
even
sure,
if the male says that he's a female.
Right, even if someone's identifying, there's a way to accommodate his needs without compromising the girl's privacy as well.
Are transgender Americans under attack? We hear that from liberals a lot.
Well, you know, there's definitely a growing conversation, I think, across the country about what is privacy, when does it start, and who has that right. And I think we've heard a lot from transgender students, and I think that's a good thing. Their voices definitely matter in this debate. What we've unfortunately not heard from as much is the other students, the young girls, young boys, who also need to be heard and need to have a voice. So my hope is as we move forward that we'll be able to come around the table and have a dialogue and debate about what matters and make sure we adopt policies that protect everyone's privacy.
Kelly Fedoruk, legal counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
U.S. commanders in Iraq blame ISIS for blowing up a historic mosque in Mosul, a building that was once the ideological heart of the terror group. National security correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Lauren, good evening. The Iraqi prime minister says ISIS blowing up Mosul's great mosque amounts to an official announcement of defeat. State Department officials here agree, saying this is yet another sign of ISIS disrespect for the Iraqi people, their culture, and their religions. All this comes as Iraqi forces close in on the terror group's last stronghold in Mosul.
As Iraqi forces make a push to liberate Mosul's old city, ISIS destroys the neighborhood's most iconic building, the Grand al-Nuri Mosque and its famous leaning minaret, the same place where ISIS first declared itself an Islamic State. This night vision video captures the explosion on camera. ISIS claims an American airstrike left the building in rubble, but Iraqis know who's really to blame. This shop owner calls the ISIS bombing a criminal act and proof the militants reject civilization and humanity. Iraq's prime minister says the terrorists blew up the building because coalition troops are closing in. Iraqi forces launched a push into the old city this week, but their progress is slowed by the estimated 100,000 civilians in harm's way, often used as human shields by ISIS fighters. A recently opened hospital in western Mosul treats up to 90 patients a day, many with injuries from exploding shells.
It's not only the wounds, but there's also a lot of psychological problems. Especially the children, they want to talk a lot about it and want to know if the parents are still there.
Christians are among those displaced by the fighting. For 3 years, militants have ravaged churches and other cultural sites in the region, like St. Elijah's Monastery in Syria. Archbishop Bashar Warda of Erbil, Iraq, urges governments to do more to protect religious minorities.
Because we are lost in all of these disputes.
Some 850,000 people have been displaced from Mosul alone. That includes not only religious minorities like Christians, but all people who disagree with ISIS radical ideology. Lauren?
Wyatt, this is not the first time ISIS fighters have tried to blow up this mosque. What did they see as the problem?
Yes, Lauren, ISIS did try to destroy this mosque once in 2014. Their problem really surrounds their interpretation of Islam. They say the tall minaret, their problem is that it promotes idolatry, which is, by the way, the same line of reasoning as to why they've continued to attack churches and monasteries. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee at the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. A Taliban suicide car bomb kills at least 29 people and injures dozens more in the southern part of Afghanistan. The explosion happened outside a bank as Afghan troops and government workers waited to collect their pay. In Somalia, at least 7 people are dead and a dozen hurt after a suicide car bombing outside a police station in the country's capital. The Al-Shabaab extremist group claimed responsibility for that attack. The group became the deadliest Islamic extreme group in Africa last year. Prosecutors say the man who attacked police in Paris on Monday had pledged allegiance to the leader of ISIS. The suspect used a vehicle packed with explosives to target officers on the Champs-Élysées, but he was the only one who died. French President Emmanuel Macron wants to pass a security bill to beef up police powers. Italian lawmakers debate legislation that would offer citizenship to children of immigrants if they are born inside the country. Currently, they can't apply for citizenship until they turn 18, a restriction that critics say hampers their full integration into Italian society. The issue is sparking an intense debate, and Pope Francis is weighing in. Vatican correspondent Mary Shovlin joins us from Rome. Mary, what is the proposed legislation on the Senate floor?
Lauren, the so-called Ius Soli law of the soil bill would grant citizenship to children born in Italy of foreign parents and to those children who have spent at least 5 years here in the Italian school system. Right now, to be an Italian, you have to be born to Italian parents by blood, not just by citizenship. The legislation hit the Senate floor a week ago today. It's unclear, though, when they're going to have that final vote.
Well, we know immigration is a very important issue to Pope Francis. How has he weighed in?
Pope Francis weighed in by voicing his support yesterday for the plan put forth by Italy's Radical Party, a plan to overhaul the country's restrictive migration policy, regularizing those who are already here illegally. Pope Francis did stop short, however, of backing the proposed legislation in the Senate. And we have to remember, Lauren, that he began this very week by meeting with migrants and refugees ahead of the World Day for Refugees on Tuesday. He greeted these refugees that are here in Rome. They're being housed by Roman parishioners, Roman parishes. And as he always does, he made it very personal, stopping to take selfies with them, stopping to play with the children that were there who had made a banner. So it was all very personal, as he often does.
How are the Italians reacting?
It's a very heated debate right now. You can't get away from it on any of the news channels or the newspapers, but rightly so. We just have to look at the numbers, Lauren. From January to May of this year, 70,000 immigrants have come across the Mediterranean Sea to hit the shores of Europe. Of those 70,000, 60,000 have landed here in Italy alone. That's 21% more than last year at this time. There seems to be no end to it, which has some Italians frustrated. On the one hand, the Pope is asking them for a very wide open door policy, but on the other hand, they're looking to their other EU member states to shoulder some of this burden.
And we have to remember, Mary, how many of them have died coming to those shores. Mary Shovlin, EWTN
Countless.
News Nightly, Vatican correspondent. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Coming up, remembering Otto Warmbier. Friends and family gathered to say goodbye to the American college student who died after being jailed in North Korea. And breathing new life into the church, how millennial priests are making a difference. Thousands of people packed into a school in Ohio to pay their respects to Otto Warmbier, the American college student who was imprisoned in North Korea for more than a year. The 22-year-old died last week after he was returned to the U.S. in a coma. Doctors say Warmbier suffered severe brain damage, and they don't believe North Korea's claim that he fell ill due to botulism. Well, there is good news about the number of future priests. Enrollment is up in Catholic seminaries. According to Georgetown University's Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate, 1,900 men under the age of 30 enrolled in 2016. That's up from 1,300 in 2005. Joining us now is Elizabeth Dias, religion and politics correspondent for Time, who penned the article, The God Squad, the next generation of Catholic priests. What a fun story to do.
So fun. Thank you so much for talking about it.
Sure. You said that you're interviewing them and that they're studying to become priests, and the current age, 34 years old, but they're doing something to reinvent the priesthood. What is that?
Well, you have to remember, these are children of the 90s, right? So it's 90s kids becoming priests. What does that look like? And
a lot of TV? I don't know.
Well, you know, they have Facebook and Instagram, most of them. One of them was telling me how he likes to brew his own beer. Another protests with Black Lives Matter protests. Another even told me he supports recreational pot usage.
Hello. Wow.
So it's a whole different idea of what kind of style of a priest do we have coming up in the ranks.
And I think that it's interesting to look at why this is important. According to Cara, in 1965, the number of priests was about 58,000, and last year it was 37,000. There were 3,500 parishes that don't have a priest. So do you think these millennials are going to change those numbers, increase them even more?
Well, they're certainly hoping to, and it's something that Pope Francis has a similar mission about. And so it's interesting watching an 80-year-old leading the global church with a similar vision as these young guys in Chicago and Washington and outside of New York. So they're really hoping that the kind of priest that they can have will be different. So it's funny, they're sometimes, even though they're more some might say outgoing, they also can be more conservative. I mean, they'll wear their clerics feeding the homeless, right? They're not just into jeans and t-shirts blending in. They want you to know that they stand for something different and that their mission is really for the kind of church that Pope Francis has been outlining.
How do you think that this is changing the culture of the church? Because there are many older and elderly priests.
It's a good question, and it's funny, there are, like in the priest homes, it's a young guy, and then the 80-year-old priest whose job he's taking over at the parish.
Right.
And so Pope Francis, for example, the next big synod is going to be about youth and young people and vocational discernment, right? So it's this bigger vision of how do we change the kind of priest and get the community really involved on a local level. And I think the U.S. and the next generation of priests is a really great example of that.
Elizabeth Dias, politics and religious correspondent for Time magazine. Thank you so much for joining us. Up next, the role of Catholics in Germany, how EWTN is helping spread the gospel in an increasingly secular country. And royal heirloom. The Vatican gives the Dutch king and queen a gift dating back centuries. Today is the feast of both saints, Thomas More and John Fisher. Both were born in England and were killed because of their faith in 1435. Pope Pius XI declared them saints in 1935. It's the 70th anniversary of the Marshall Plan, when the U.S. embraced open markets after World War II to help rebuild Europe. The anniversary comes amid concern in Europe and elsewhere about President Donald Trump's America First approach to trade. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said General Marshall was convinced that busy trade benefited all concerned and that we should not forget today how right that is. Out of 82 million Germans, about a third are Catholic. Our next guest gives us an inside look, and joining us now is Martin Rottweiler, the managing editor and program director for EWTN's 24-hour German channel. We're so delighted to have you here, Martin. Welcome.
Thank you, Lauren.
Tell us about Catholics in Germany.
When you think of Germany, you may think of a Christian country, but that is not anymore the case. Naturally, we have a constitution that is based on Christian values, but the social reality has changed. And if you mentioned, we have only a third of the 82 million are Catholics, a third are Protestants. We have the commemoration of the 500 years of the Reformation this year, and we have a third, or more than a third even, of non-baptized people, 4.7 million Muslims among them.
You know, you and I were having a really nice conversation earlier, and you said that there are some people in Germany who don't know Jesus.
Think of that, there are more than 40 years of a communist regime in Eastern Germany, and it's really a fact that there are people that don't know Jesus. They would ask you, who is the man on the cross? And I think this is really amazing. And so we see that we have a big task to do as EWTN, really to be missionary, to be really to give people the chance to encounter Jesus for the first time in her life.
Here, abortion is constantly being debated in the public square. Is that the same in Germany?
It's not that much as it is here the case. And I think it's sometimes also church hierarchy is a little bit not so outspoken about it, and because it's an inconvenient topic. And I think a lot of pro-life organizations feel a little bit neglected. But we started a pro-life march pro-life.
Yes.
And it's the 12th March pro-life happened last year, and it's every September now. And there are about 7,000 participants last year. And since recently, Also, bishops, a few bishops participated, but it's naturally not comparable to what you can see and what you see here in Washington, where hundreds of thousands are walking. But I think there's a step, and they're going into the right direction. And yeah, I think we should raise the topic more and more.
Angela Merkel just met with the Pope, and they talked about climate change. What is her relationship in Germany with Catholics and Christians?
I mean, she has not a clear standpoint in terms of pro-life issues. Homosexual marriage is accepted, but she is a little bit hesitant in terms of the full rights for homosexual marriages in terms of adaptation. She's Protestant. Her father was a Protestant pastor in Eastern Germany. And I would say, okay, when you look into her, she may have some Christian values, but I think she's in a certain way distant to the Catholics, so that she's not really kind of in favor of the Catholics, so to speak, if we take it simply.
It was just lovely having you here on the program and having you here with us all week learning about News Nightly. Martin Rottweiler, Managing Editor and Program Director at EWTN Germany. Pope Francis welcomes the Dutch King and Queen to the Vatican today and sends them home with a special gift. King Willem-Alexander and Queen Maxima of the Netherlands are in Italy for an official state visit, including a private meeting with the Pope. From there, they were escorted to the Apostolic Library, where they received a baton that belonged to William of Orange. Spanish Catholics received the baton after their victory over Dutch Protestants in the 16th century, and until now it's been held in a Jesuit monastery in Spain. The superior of the Jesuits, Father Arturo Sosa, personally delivered the baton back to its rightful owner, King Willem. The historical artifact will be on display at the Dutch National Military Museum next year as part of an exhibit on William of Orange, and then it will be returned to Spain. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, I'm Lauren Ashburn. Please follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Good night, and God bless you.